This table is for real family. The words landed harder than any slap. Sharp, clean. Impossible to pretend I hadn't heard them. For a split second, the low murmur of the restaurant vanished. The clink of silverware, the hum of polite conversation, the soft jazz drifting from hidden speakers. All of it dropped away. Every eye at the long mahogany table turned toward me, some curious, some amused, most deliberately blank. I stood there, my hand still resting on the back of an empty chair, my black blazer pressed and perfect, my posture calm enough to fool strangers. Inside, something buckled. Linda Morgan didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her tone carried the casual authority of someone who had never once questioned her place in the world. She swirled the wine in her glass and offered a thin smile that never reached her eyes. "You must be mistaken, Claire," she said lightly. "This table is for real family." A ripple of restrained laughter followed. Not loud, not crude, the kind of laughter that gives everyone else permission to stay comfortable. My father, Richard Morgan, studied the cut of his steak as if it required deep concentration. My mother, Patricia, adjusted her napkin with unnecessary care. My brother Eric leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone, the corner of his mouth twitching as though this were mildly entertaining. No one contradicted her. No one looked at me. This wasn't new. It was simply louder. The restaurant itself was everything old Seattle money liked to pretend it wasn't. White tablecloths, leather-bound menus, waiters who addressed men by last name and women by jewelry. A place where reputations mattered. A place chosen carefully, deliberately. I had arrived early, 15 minutes early. Habit, caution. The kind you develop when you've learned that arriving on time often means arriving too late to matter. Yet they were already seated, already settled, already whole without me. Linda's gaze flicked briefly to my empty chair, then away. "Don't be dramatic," she added, as if she were offering kindness. "You can wait at the bar." Something warm crept up my neck, flushed my cheeks. I could feel it spreading, the way shame always announces itself before you can stop it. Around us, conversations dipped and rose again. Strangers pretended not to notice. They always do. I thought of Christmas mornings when my gifts came from the clearance rack while Linda's arrived in glossy boxes. Of birthdays remembered late, if at all. Of vacations discussed in front of me as if I were furniture. I had spent years telling myself it was misunderstanding, circumstance, my own sensitivity. But moments like this have a way of clarifying everything. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Any defense would sound like pleading. Any anger would make me the problem. I had learned that lesson young. So I did the only thing I've been taught to do well. I swallowed. "I see," I said quietly. As I stepped back, my eyes met someone else's across the table. Evelyn Whitmore, my grandmother. She hadn't laughed. She hadn't looked away. Her sharp blue eyes, so steady, so assessing, rested on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Her fingers tapped once against the white linen, just once. In that small, precise movement, I felt something shift. Not comfort, not rescue, recognition. And for the first time that night, I understood that what had just happened was not a misunderstanding at all, but a declaration. Dinner continued without me. Not literally, of course. I was still sitting there. But the conversation flowed around my place setting as if it were an inconvenience everyone agreed to ignore. Richard discussed market fluctuations with a man 2 tables over. Patricia commented on a charity luncheon she might host this fall. Eric laughed at something on his phone and showed it to Linda, who barely glanced before returning to her wine. No one asked me a question. No one filled the space where I sat. The waiter arrived with practiced grace, announcing the specials as though this were a normal family gathering. Ribeye, seared salmon, imported truffle butter. Linda ordered without looking at the prices. She never did. I ate slowly, mostly to give my hands something to do. The food tasted like nothing. I focused on small details instead. The weight of the silverware, the crystal glass sweating against my fingers, the rhythm of my own breathing. When dessert plates were cleared, the waiter returned with a leather folder and placed it directly in front of me. "Whenever you're ready, ma'am." I froze. The folder felt heavier than it should have been. Linda leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, her smile widening just enough to show satisfaction. "You said your design firm's doing well, right?" she asked, voice bright. "Consider this your contribution. Family supports family." I opened the folder. $3,720. The number stared back at me, clean and final. My chest tightened. I knew exactly what that amount meant. Rent, insurance, groceries. Weeks of careful budgeting undone in a single motion. Around the table, heads tilted, waiting, watching. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about obedience, about whether I would accept whatever role they handed me without complaint. I reached into my purse and pulled out my card. My fingers shook, but I kept my expression neutral. Letting it decline would be a scene. Scenes were unforgivable. "I need to step away for a moment," I said calmly, pushing my chair back. No one stopped me. The restroom was quiet, cool marble and muted lighting. I gripped the edge of the counter and stared at my reflection. My lipstick was still perfect. My eyes were not. I inhaled slowly, exhaled, again. "You shouldn't have to be used to that." The voice came from behind me. I turned. Evelyn Whitmore stood near the door, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. She moved closer, her reflection joining mine in the mirror. "No one should ever make you pay for being tolerated," she continued. I said nothing. Pity would have broken me faster than cruelty. She reached into her handbag and placed a single card on the counter. Thick stock, embossed lettering. "Come see me tomorrow," she said. 10 o'clock, my office. I finally met her eyes. "Why?" I asked. Her gaze didn't waver. "Because there are things you deserve to know." She turned and left without another word, leaving the card behind. I picked it up with trembling fingers, the weight of it settling into my palm. And for the first time that night, the silence felt different. Evelyn Whitmore's office sat at the top of the Whitmore Industries Tower, where the city looked small and manageable through floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything about the space was intentional. The heavy oak desk, the framed patterns on the wall, the absence of personal clutter. This was not a room designed for sentiment. She gestured for me to sit, then took the chair opposite mine. "Claire," she said evenly, "I'm going to tell you the truth. You may want to stop me. Don't." She slid a photograph across the desk. Two people smiled back at me. A man with kind eyes and a crooked grin. A woman whose cheekbones mirrored my own so precisely it made my throat tighten. They stood shoulder to shoulder in front of a laboratory sign, bearing a name I recognized from textbooks. "These were your parents," Evelyn said. "Michael and Laura Bennett, biomedical engineers, brilliant ones." My hands hovered over the photo, unsure whether touching it would make it real. "They worked here," she continued. "Developed imaging systems that saved this company millions in research costs. They were driving back from a winter conference when their car hit black ice. You were 6. The room felt suddenly too quiet. They left a trust for you, Evelyn said, opening the slim folder. $735,000, strictly designated for your care, education, and future. The words didn't land all at once. They arrived piece by piece, each one heavier than the last. My voice failed me. I never knew. You weren't meant to, she replied. The trust was transferred to Richard Morgan when he became your legal guardian. She spread documents across the desk, bank statements, transfer records, property filings, dates and amounts aligned with unsettling precision. The account was emptied in 11 months, Evelyn said quietly. Every withdrawal approved by your father. I stared at the numbers. Private school tuition, a down payment on a vacation home, investment accounts bearing names I recognized far too well. My childhood replayed itself in a new light. The reason there was never money for art classes, why scholarships were emphasized so heavily, why practical choices were always the only option offered to me. They didn't forget you, Evelyn said. They spent you. The word cut clean through any remaining doubt. I leaned back slowly, my mind racing to catch up with my heart. Why tell me now? Evelyn folded her hands. Because Richard believes he's entitled to whatever he can take, and now he's decided that includes me. I looked up. What do you mean? He's been telling the board I'm losing my judgment, she said, that I need help, that the company needs protection. A bitter smile touched her lips. You were never the problem, Claire. You were proof. Proof of what they were capable of and how long they'd been getting away with it. I left the office carrying copies of a past that finally made sense, and the understanding that nothing about my place in that family had ever been accidental. Evelyn waited until I had settled back into the chair before speaking again. The photograph was still between us, my parents' faces staring up like witnesses to a trial that had taken 22 years to convene. I made a mistake, she said. The word sounded strange coming from her. Evelyn Whitmore was not a woman known for them. When your parents died, I was 68, too old to raise a child. Richard had just married Patricia. They spoke about family, stability, values. He promised me you would be treated as his own. She paused, her jaw tightening. I wanted to believe him. I said nothing. I had learned that some apologies arrived too late to soften the damage. When I began to notice discrepancies, small ones at first, you were already grown, she continued. You had learned to survive without asking questions. By the time I understood the scope of it, confronting him would have changed nothing for you. Her gaze lifted to mine, steady and unflinching. But it can change what happens next. I felt the shift then. Not sympathy, alignment. Richard has been preparing for this moment for years, Evelyn said, turning slightly in her chair. Positioning himself with board members, hosting dinners, planning doubts. Doubts about you, I said. Yes. Her mouth curved, humorless. About my mind. The pieces slid into place. The sudden concern, the careful language, the way the dinner at the restaurant had felt staged. A performance of unity with me cast deliberately outside the frame. He wants control, I said. He believes it's his birthright, Evelyn replied. The same way he believed your trust fund was his to spend. She reached into a drawer and removed a thin folder, sliding it towards me. These are people who work for me, she said. Helen Carter, my corporate attorney. Samuel Brooks, forensic accountant. They don't speculate. They prove. I glanced at the names, then back at her. Why involve me? Because you are already part of this whether you choose to be or not, she answered calmly. And because Richard has underestimated you his entire life. That was true. He always had. I won't ask you to do anything, Evelyn added. But I won't pretend this will end quietly. I thought of the restaurant, the bill, the practiced indifference, the way Linda's words had landed so easily. I'm done staying quiet, I said. Evelyn nodded once, as if she had expected nothing less. Good, she said. Then we proceed carefully. Not with anger, not with emotion, with facts. The storage unit smelled like dust and old cardboard, the kind of place where time settled and stayed. I hadn't been back in years. Richard had insisted everything from my childhood be boxed and kept safe, which usually meant out of sight and out of mind. I knelt on the concrete floor, sleeves rolled up, working through boxes labeled in my own handwriting. School papers, sketchbooks, a cracked snow globe from a long-forgotten trip I hadn't been invited on. Nothing. I was about to give up when I noticed the smallest box tucked behind a stack of yearbooks. No label, just a manila envelope resting on top. My name was written across it in careful ink. For Claire's future. My breath caught. I knew instantly that this wasn't something I had written. The handwriting was deliberate, adult, loving. Inside were photocopies, legal documents, trust agreements dated months before my parents' deaths. I recognized Evelyn's signature as an original executor. But what stopped me cold were the email printouts clipped neatly behind them. Messages between my parents and Evelyn. Discussions about safeguards. Explicit instructions stating the money was not to be used for family assets, tuition for other children, or shared household expenses. They had planned. They had protected me. And someone had ignored every word. I sat back on my heels, the concrete cold even through my jeans, and took photos of each page with my phone. I made sure timestamps were visible. Every document stayed exactly where I found it. No fingerprints added, no corners bent. This wasn't memory anymore. This was evidence. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel confused about the past. I felt certain. If you were in my place, would you keep digging? Or would you walk away to protect what little piece you had left? Let me know what you would do. Tap like, leave a comment, and share your advice, because what comes next will change everything in ways I never imagined. I sealed the envelope, slid it carefully back into the box, and locked the unit behind me. As I stepped into the sunlight, something unfamiliar settled in my chest. Not hope, resolve. The Morgan house looked exactly as it always had. Immaculate lawn, polished brass door handle, the quiet confidence of money that had never worried about consequences. I rang the bell without hesitation. Patricia opened the door, surprise flickering across her face before settling into practiced composure. Claire? We weren't expecting you. I know, I said, stepping inside. I won't take long. The dining room smelled of roasted chicken and rosemary. Richard sat at the head of the table, napkin folded with precision. Linda lounged in a chair, scrolling on her phone. Eric glanced up, then quickly away. No one invited me to sit. I put out a chair anyway. I know what you did with my trust fund, I said, placing the folder on the table between the serving dishes. Richard's eyes narrowed. This again? My mother has been filling your head with fantasies. I opened the folder and slid a document towards him. These are bank transfers approved by you. Dates, amounts, property purchases. Patricia's hand froze mid-reach for her water glass. Linda laughed, short and sharp. So what? You lived under our roof. Things cost money. I looked at her. Not $700,000 meant for a 6-year-old. Eric finally looked up. Really looked. His jaw tightened. This money was left for me, I continued, my voice steady. Not for vacations, not for private schools, not for investments. Richard pushed his chair back slightly. You have no idea how families work, Claire. That's interesting, I replied. Because what I see is a family that stole from a child who couldn't fight back. The room went still. Patricia swallowed. We did our best. No, I said quietly. You did what was convenient. I gathered the documents and stood. Evelyn knows everything. She's already working with attorneys and a forensic accountant. Richard's face darkened. You think anyone will believe you over us? I met his gaze. They will when the numbers speak. Linda scoffed, but the sound lacked conviction. Eric said nothing at all. I walked out without waiting for permission, the door closing behind me with a soft, final click. Outside, the evening air felt cooler, cleaner. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. And for the first time, I knew they were afraid. The conference room at Whitmore Industries was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling glass, a table long enough to seat 12 without crowding, leather chairs that didn't squeak when you shifted, as if even discomfort had been engineered out of the space. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, hands folded, spine straight. Samuel Brooks stood beside a large monitor, remote in hand. Helen Carter occupied the seat closest to the door, legal pad already filled with notes. I took the chair Evelyn indicated. No one offered reassurance. None was needed. Let's begin with the trust, Samuel said, clicking the screen to life. Columns of numbers appeared. Dates, account names, transaction codes. Clean, unemotional. The withdrawals from Claire's trust, he continued, align almost perfectly with the Morgan's major expenditures over an 11-month period. He highlighted a row. Here, down payment on a vacation property. 3 weeks later, tuition payment to a private academy. 2 months after that, an investment account opened under a shell holding. I watched the data scroll past, recognizing moments I lived through without understanding. The year Linda came home with a new car. The summer we were told money was tight. This pattern, Samuel said, doesn't stop with the trust. The screen shifted. Corporate accounts now. Whitmore Industries. Over the past 6 years, he continued, Richard Morgan approved acquisitions at values significantly above market rate. Each seller has a personal or professional connection to him. Helen tapped her pen once. Conflict of interest. Repeated, Samuel confirmed. And concealed. Evelyn remained silent, but I could feel her attention sharpen. There's more, Samuel said. Offshore accounts, funds routed through intermediaries tied to Patricia Morgan's brother. The amounts match internal research allocations. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't greed. It was a system. They didn't just take from you, Samuel said, turning slightly toward me. They practiced. Helen closed her folder. This gives us leverage on 3 fronts: personal fraud, corporate misconduct, and attempted misrepresentation of Evelyn's capacity. Evelyn finally spoke. Richard believes chaos protects him. She looked directly at me. He's wrong. I nodded, understanding now what this room represented. Not safety, preparation. We move carefully, Helen said. No accusations without documentation. No emotion without structure. I glanced back at the numbers on the screen. They told a story more clearly than memory ever could. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability and the quiet certainty that facts don't bend for family names. I noticed the man before I reached my car. He stood across the street, pretending to study his phone, a black sedan idling behind him. When I shifted directions, so did he. When I paused, he raised the camera just long enough for the lens to catch the light. Click. My stomach tightened, but I didn't react. I kept walking, counting my steps, memorizing the angle of the streetlights. Fear feeds on acknowledgement. I wasn't going to give it that. That night, my apartment felt wrong the moment I unlocked the door. Nothing was missing. No drawers overturned. No obvious mess. But the chair at my desk had been moved a few inches to the left. Papers I always stacked by size were out of order. My laptop lid sat at a different angle than I'd left it. Someone had been here. I stood still, listening to my own breathing, letting the reality settle in. This wasn't a robbery. It was a search. They weren't looking for valuables. They were looking for proof. I didn't touch anything. I stepped back into the hallway and called Evelyn. They came into my apartment, I said quietly. She didn't ask how I knew. Are you safe? Yes. Good. Then we adjust. By morning, my documents were no longer mine to carry. Samuel arranged secure storage off-site. Helen coordinated with a private security firm that specialized in corporate disputes, not home alarms. Quiet professionals. No uniforms, no announcements. Evelyn insisted I stay at her house, not as protection alone, but as strategy. If Richard believed intimidation would make you careless, she said, he's miscalculated. The next few days moved quickly. Surveillance logs, license plate records, background checks that traced the sedan back to a shell company with ties to one of Richard's longtime associates. They were sloppy. Fear always makes people sloppy. I expected to feel shaken. Instead, I felt confirmed. People who believed they were winning didn't break into apartments. They waited. They smiled. They denied. This was panic. On the third night, as I sit at Evelyn's window overlooking the darkened lawn, I understood something with absolute clarity. They were no longer in control of the pace. And once that balance shifts, there's no way to quietly put it back. The headline reached my phone before I finished my morning coffee. Industry icons show signs of decline. Family steps in. I didn't need to open the article to know who was behind it. By noon, the story had spread. Business blogs, local news, opinion columns wrapped in sympathetic language and soft lighting. Richard's quotes were everywhere, measured, sorrowful, heavy with responsibility. It's heartbreaking, he said, but when someone you love can no longer protect what they built, family has to make difficult decisions. Linda followed within hours. A carefully staged photo appeared online, her arm around Evelyn at a charity gala, captioned with words like duty, love, sacrifice. She looked the part perfectly. I did not. By the end of the day, my inbox filled with polite withdrawals. Clients citing uncertainty. Partners postponing meetings. One longtime collaborator hesitated before saying what we both understood. We just can't afford the association right now. I hung up and stared at the wall, the weight finally pressing in. What if they won by exhaustion? Not in court, not in boardrooms, but here, quietly, financially, reputationally. Evelyn found me in the sitting room, phone still in my hand. They're painting you as a manipulator, she said calmly. Someone exploiting a confused old woman. I laughed once, short and hollow. They always said I didn't belong. She studied me for a long moment. Then she said, truth doesn't rush. Lies do. The words settled, firm and steady. They went public because they're out of options, she continued, and because they think pressure will make you retreat. I straightened, feeling something solidify where doubt had been. "It won't," I said. That evening, Helen called with updates. Samuel forwarded revised reports. Every document double-checked. Every timeline locked. The noise outside grew louder. Accusations multiplied. The air felt tight, charged. But beneath it all, something held. Facts don't trend. They wait. And the people who count on lies rarely know how to survive the moment waiting ends. The boardroom was full by the time Richard walked in. He moved with practiced confidence, one hand resting on the shoulder of a baldy man in a gray suit. "This is Dr. Alan Pierce," Richard announced, "a neurologist specializing in cognitive decline."
Folders were passed around, blue covers, carefully worded concern, video clips cued and ready. The screen flickered to life. Short, edited moments of Evelyn pausing mid-sentence. A mispronounced name, a glance at notes. Ordinary human lapses stitched together into a dangerous illusion. Dr. Pierce cleared his throat. "While I have not conducted a full examination, these indicators are consistent with early impairment." Murmurs rippled across the table. I stood. "Before any vote is taken," I said evenly, "there's context you need." The room stilled. I placed my documents on the table. When I was 6, my parents died. They left a trust of $780,000 for my care and education. It was emptied within a year. I nodded to Samuel Brooks. He connected his laptop. Bank records filled the screen. Dates aligned, transfers matched. Property purchases followed. "This pattern," Samuel said, "extends into corporate funds. Overpayments, self-dealing, offshore accounts." Helen Carter stood next. "You've also been presented with medical speculation. Here are 3 independent evaluations conducted last month. All confirm Ms. Whitmore's cognitive health." She slid copies across the table. "And this," I added, "is a sworn statement from Dr. Pierce's office manager." The color drained from his face as I continued. "He never examined my grandmother. He was paid $54,000 3 days ago." Silence broke into chaos. Linda shot to her feet. "She's lying! She's not even real family!" Several board members stared at her. Phones lifted, recording. The chairman rose slowly. "That will be enough." Security escorted Richard, Patricia, Linda, and Eric out of the room. No protest now, no speeches. Minutes later, the decision was unanimous. Richard Morgan was removed. All findings were referred to federal authorities. Evelyn stood. "As founder and majority shareholder, I appoint my successor." She turned to me. "Claire Morgan." The room approved without hesitation. Months later, restitution was ordered. Sentences handed down, assets seized. I didn't celebrate. I built. The Whitmore Children's Foundation now stands where secrets once lived, serving those who were forgotten the way I was. Here's what life taught me the hard way. Family isn't proven by blood, but by behavior. Silence protects abuse. Truth, documented and patient, ends it. And entitlement always collapses when it meets accountability. If this story moved you, please leave a like for the channel. Share your thoughts or advice in the comments. Tell us where you're listening from. Thank you for staying until the end, and we wish you strength and health. You've been listening to Revenge Story. Until next time.